Once again, a very good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you. A very warm welcome to this session. In this session, we will be looking at some very powerful strategies that will help us to master 700 plus level questions in the CR section. Uh, I'll be your host for this evening. My name is Sunita, and I have trained 20,000 plus students in over a decade of my experience in the test prep industry. At GMAT-Viz, I'm the verbal expert, and I have been doing the research for the GMAT exam for quite some time now. All right. So let me walk you through the various portions of this webinar. So the first section, I'll just talk very briefly about who we are, what is GMAT-Viz, okay, and what is it different that we bring to the table. Thereafter, the second section will be the most important part of this webinar, the very purpose of this webinar, which is going to last for the major portion of the 2 hours that we have ahead of us. And then we will have a short FAQ section at the end when you can ask me anything you want. Co-hosting this session with me will be Sakib, who will also be answering some of the queries that you will be putting. This is just a request, guys, right at the beginning now, that while I am discussing something, just hold on to your queries, all right, while I'm discussing a question. Once I finish discussing the question, and if you have any doubts, you can definitely ask those doubts, all right? That way, if I have not covered any of your doubts during my discussion, those can get solved. And if I have already covered, that's very good, all right? Now, let me begin very quickly about GMAT-Viz by talking about the student pain points. Now, in my long experience, okay, what I have seen is that when students are preparing on their own, there are some there are some problems that they face. Okay, one is that they have to plan the studies themselves. They have to plan their studies as to how they will start, where they will start, what will they do first, how much will they do first, and so on and so forth. And if any of you fall in this category, you would understand what I'm talking about. Okay, they are also left on their own to analyze their strengths and weaknesses, and even if they have joined any test coaching institute, they don't really get any individual attention in the class. All right. So again, we have seen that some of the test institutes, okay, the coaching institutes, they do try to address these pain points. Okay, so they provide you with a study plan. All right, but usually the study plan is a very static study plan, as in it's a 1 month plan or a 3 month plan or a 6 month plan, and it does not change as you learn. Now, what do I mean by saying that it's a static plan and it does not change as you learn? Let's say you started with a 3 month plan, okay, but your progress turned out actually much better than you anticipated. In that case, your plan should adapt, okay? Your plan should change accordingly and tell you that you should now study at a different pace. But most study plans, in fact, none of the study plans in the market really adapt to your pace. They don't change, they remain static. So either you end up wasting a lot of time, or you land up not going for the pace you should have gone. The other is that some of these institutes provide you with statistics about your performance. Okay, they share statistics with you. Okay, but then please understand what these statistics do to you, or what do they do for you? Do they help you? Do they really help you gain insights on which you can take action? For example, do the statistics actually tell you what exactly is it that you're not doing right, with which part of the concept you're not getting, and where should you go back for the revision? All right. So these insights, although they are shared with you, they are not actionable. You can't really do anything with them. And if you do try to take up private tutoring, most of the for that individual attention, they are not affordable at all. Okay, so keeping all these things in mind, the pain points and what mostly is available in the industry now, what GMAT-Viz has done is stepped in, and we really pride ourselves on the way we have tried to revolutionize the way students learn. Okay, what we've done is we've solved the problems that students face. So we provide you with a study plan which is dynamic, which is adaptive. It changes according to your progress, your pace, the time you are able to give. Okay, they focus on your weak areas. The AI driven platform directs you to the areas that you are not doing well in before you move on to the other areas. So you are right away able to target your weak areas and not waste time. Okay, so this real time AI intervention, and of course our mentoring, okay, the personal intervention that we also put in from time to time, that really helps you in a very effective and efficient way to improve your scores. We provide you with real time analysis, which helps you do this. And finally, all of this translates into you being able to achieve your target, okay, reaching your dream score. All right, so that was about us, about GMAT quiz. And now I will start off with the main portion of the webinar. So before I start off with that, I want to ask all of you a very small question. Okay? Saqib, are you there with us now?
Yes, I'm there.
Oh, okay, cool, great. So anything you'd like to add to all this? Or we are good?
No, ma'am, you're good to go, ma'am.
Okay, cool, great. All right, guys. So I would like to start by asking you, and you can answer me in your chats, guys. What is it about CR that stumps you most? Like, why do you think you falter at CR? Okay, why do you falter? Any idea why you falter at CR? Or okay, yes, and that's the question. I want you to answer that quickly. Why do you believe you're not able to answer CR questions with confidence, with accuracy? Some of you have been might have been preparing for some time, so you might have an idea about what is it that troubles you. Ramandeep says timing is a big pain point. It takes me more than 2 minutes. Okay. Yes. So let's see what else some of you have to say about your. So Liana says, in my everyday life, I have inherently flawed arguments. As a result, I cannot pick up the flawed arguments in those questions. Joshua says, answer options seem very confusing. All right, yes. The choices are intended to confuse a student, but then we'll talk about that, why that confusion is there at all. All right, so Mehun said that confusing. Arun says does not understand the passage to identify the conclusions, not being able to identify the conclusion and facts clearly. Asim says dissecting the argument is the pain for me. All right, so we are looking at, so what we are looking at is here that some of the pain points are the argument itself, that is the stimulus. Another pain point are close answer choices. Time is a factor. So all these things, trust me, resonate very, very clearly with what we are going to discuss now. Okay. So let me start again. You will see in my experience, I have seen that students falter at solving CR questions mainly because of two things. Okay. And the other things that you have just shared with me actually are a part of these two umbrella problems. So one of the umbrella problems is that you're not able to identify the scope of the argument. Now remember this term because I'll be using this a lot. I'll discuss this with you. I'll tell you all about it and how to spot it. But understand, at the base of all your troubles is you are not able to identify the scope of the argument that you have set about to solve. And the other is you are not able to identify the logical gaps in the argument. So these two things, the scope of the argument and the logical gaps in the argument. Okay, these are two things that you are not able to grasp, because of which, because of the first one, you land up marking out of scope choices and as the correct answer choice. If you are not able to identify the logical gaps, it means you are not able to understand what vital information is missing in the given argument. Okay. Now the next question that arises is, what is the reason behind these two, the failure in identifying the scope of the argument and the failure to identify the logical gaps in the argument? Okay, what is the reason? Now the answer is very simple, a lack of crystal clear understanding of the stimulus and the conclusion. As some of you were saying just now, that you find it very difficult to understand what the argument is saying, or some of you were saying that you are not able to identify the conclusion clearly. And that is why. So you understand how we are looking at the ripple effect. So you falter at identifying the scope and the logical gaps because you do not have a crystal clear understanding of the stimulus. Okay, because you cannot identify the and because of this you cannot identify the logical gaps. Okay, now the next question that arises is, why are students not able to derive a clear understanding of the stimulus? Okay, why is it that you do not derive a clear understanding about the stimulus? If this is the problem, then what lies behind it? Let's see. And be honest when I'm discussing this with you. Be honest, introspect, and see whether you are somewhere or the other doing the same or not. Okay. So what happens is, often students in their hurry, they just gloss over the passage. When they're reading the stimulus, they're reading it and they're not really understanding it. They're not putting together the information to understand the scenario. So what happens is, they understand some parts, okay, and they are confused about other parts, or they have some half understanding, half baked understanding about some of the parts. And as you guys pointed out, at this juncture, when you are reading the stimulus and you have half understanding, what you probably tell yourself is, okay, I will get back to the passage for clarity on this issue later when I'm going through the answer choices. This is what you tell yourself, because there is that time clock ticking in your mind constantly, that I'm going to take a lot of time. And with this kind of half-baked understanding, you move on to the answer choices. Okay, so what happens then? Let's see what happens then. Here's what happens. Okay? Because of that incomplete understanding of the stimulus, what happens when you go to the answer choice is, you just keep running back and forth between the stimulus and the answer choice. All right, in doing this, you actually waste time instead of saving time. Often you choose out of scope answers because you did not understand the stimulus, therefore you did not understand the scope of the conclusion or the argument. You will end up marking incorrect answer choices, often ones that are preceding the correct one. There's an answer choice bias working there, or maybe there's a confusion between two choices, as you said, very close choices. And because you have not understood the stimulus very clearly, you mark some choice, you are low on confidence. What actually is worse is, this lack of confidence in marking the answer choice actually hurts your SC and RC performance. So can you see that ripple effect? And all because you did not analyze the stimulus correctly. So one of the powerful strategies that we'll talk about today is stimulus analysis, guys. And I'll show you the right way to do it. So just hold on to that thought. Okay. So when all this happens, as a student, you believe that you're making a mistake with the answer choices. Okay, you think that because the answer choice is closed, you're not able to get the correct answer choice. But trust me, you made the mistake long time back while you were reading the passage without deriving the complete understanding of the passage. So what we will do in this session, the first thing is, I'm going to discuss and demonstrate the importance of understanding correctly the scope of the argument. And I'll also discuss how to identify the scope of this argument through proper passage analysis. And we will talk about the importance of that stimulus analysis while understanding the scope of the argument. Finally, we will also talk about some very important frameworks which will help you solve some very difficult questions. Okay. So the first thing, let's start off with the scope of the argument. Now, you might have been wondering by now, she keeps talking about scope of the argument, scope of the argument. What does she mean by it? Okay, so here goes, and try to understand. When we talk about scope, okay, what we mean is, scope means the range or extent of something, all right? So when we talk about a scope of argument, what we are trying to say is, it is the range up to which the argument's power or the impact of the conclusion of the argument prevails. That is the range of the argument or the scope of the argument. Okay, so you could better understand this by imagining that the range is a circle. Okay, the scope of the argument, the range of the argument is a circle, and imagine that there are ideas which are related to the argument, but they do not impact the ideas within the argument. So they lie outside that circle, and therefore they are out of scope answer choices. Okay, so beyond this circle lie ideas that may be related to the argument, but do not impact the ideas within the argument. Okay, so such ideas that may be related to the argument, but do not impact the conclusion are called out of scope ideas. All right. Okay, great. These out of scope ideas are GMAT's favorite method of trapping students, guys. Trust me on this. And we often find out of scope ideas as part of the incorrect answer choice. So when students say, okay, that the answer choices are very close and I often end up marking the incorrect one, what is actually happening is that the student has failed to understand the scope of the argument. Okay. So as you can see this, I want you to absorb all of this because accepting what you are not doing right is the first and very important step to actually doing the right thing. Okay. So you can see that the importance of identifying the scope of the argument is that such an understanding will help you eliminate many incorrect answer choices. Okay, it will give you a better understanding. It will help you understand the author's line of reasoning, and you will be able to eliminate a lot of incorrect answer choices. All right. Now, therefore, the thing to be noted here is, okay, it is important to be able to understand the structure of the argument and the author's line of reasoning before you even move on to understand the scope of the argument. Okay. So to understand the importance of identifying the scope of the argument, let's look at the following official question. There's an OG question I will bring up. Okay. Even if you have solved this OG question, do not pay attention to, do not try, just think that I have solved this question. Pay attention to the methodology, guys, because that is what you will be replicating. You should be replicating when you're solving questions on your own. All right. So follow closely how we are going to identify the scope of the argument. All right. So a quick yes if you have uh, understood all of this, guys. Let me just bring up the poll. Give me just a moment. So just answer a yes if you have understood so far what we have discussed. Mostly we have discussed your pain points and how we are going to address them. Okay, great. All right. So for those of you who joined slightly late, we are now going to see the process by which we will understand the scope of the argument, so that we are able to analyze the argument and choose the correct answer choice with confidence. Okay, we are looking at a very important strategy over here, and that is scope analysis. This is one of the most powerful strategies that we are going to look at. Okay, so here we are. Let me bring up the question. Here is the official question, and as I said, do not be bothered just about solving the question. I want you to focus on the way you solve this question. So right now, I want you to solve it the way you do it. I'll give you about a couple of minutes to solve this question for those of you who haven't. And for those of you who have, I still want you to refresh your memory and solve this question. And then I'm going to begin my scope analysis. So I'll mute myself in the meantime, guys. Okay, guys, another 10 seconds. And I want you to put in the polls, and then we'll get started with the most important part, and that is showing you how to understand the scope of the argument. Okay, guys, I'll count 5 and then I'll end the poll. So if you have your answers ready with you but have not marked in the polls, do so, please. Right? So here goes 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. And I'm going to end the poll. Okay, here it is. All right. So from what I can see is 10% of you believe choice A is the correct one. 23% of you have marked choice B. A very small 3% has marked have marked C. Majority of you believe it's choice D. 46% of you believe that a good majority, that is. And then there are 16% of you who believe it's choice E. So as we can see, this is a definitely 700 plus level OG question, and the varied answer choices show that a lot of you are confused about the answer choice. Okay. Now, guys, before I begin with the analysis, as I requested earlier, hold on to your questions. Once the entire analysis is through and you are still not clear about something, you can ask me your questions. Okay. Again, the aim of this question was to help you identify or help you learn how to identify the scope, how to analyze the scope of the argument through stimulus analysis. So the two things that we are going to look at here will be how to analyze the stimulus and how to therefore arrive at the scope. Okay, and we will also later on coming up is a small drill to help you in that stimulus analysis that some of you have been asking about. Okay, just pay very close attention, guys, even if I'm talking about something very simple, because it's the simple steps which will really help you build on that, will help you reach that 700 plus level goal. So here it goes. Okay, right. So this is how I would analyze the stimulus. And you will notice that I do not move from one sentence to the other unless and until I have understood completely what that sentence has to say or what it means. Okay. All right, so here's the first sentence. Last year, so we're talking about a period last year, sorry, all refuse. So here refuse refers to waste. Even if you don't know the meaning, just understand refuse is something. So all refuse collected by Shelbyville City Services was incinerated. Again, if you do not know the meaning of incinerated, okay, just remember something was done to the refuse last year. All right. Okay. So in my mind, I've got to tell myself that this first sentence is a premise. All right. This sentence states a fact about what happened in Shelbyville last year. Last year, what happened was all the waste that was collected by the city services was incinerated or burnt. Okay, fine. Let me now move to the next sentence. This incineration generated a large quantity of residual ash. So again, it's talking about an event that took place last year. So it's also a premise. And this premise tells me that the result of burning of all the waste was that a huge amount of ash was produced, which remained behind, residual ash. Okay. Thus, in these two premises that we have read so far, I'm going to relate back the relationship. I'm going to relate back these two premises, and then I'm going to move forward. These two premises together tell me about the outcome of an action that took place last year. So I'm trying to get the scenario that is unfolding in the stimulus clear, get the clarity. All right, let's move forward. Now this is a long sentence. In order to reduce the amount of residual ash, okay. So, all right, Shelbyville generates this. So in order to reduce the amount of residual ash, Shelbyville generates this year. Now, straight away, this premise, okay, this premise is stating a plan. How do I know there's a plan? We'll come back to it. So let's say In order to reduce the amount of residual ash Shelbyville generates this year to half of last year's total, the city has revamped its collection program. So this again talks about something that has already been done. All right. Now, I was telling you a while back, this sentence presents a plan and a goal. Now, how do we know that it presents a plan and a goal? Well, notice the use of the words in order to. So whenever these are used, usually it indicates some aim, some objective, or some goal. All right. Okay. So the goal is to reduce the amount of ash generated by the burning of Shelbyville waste this year. So this year, Shelbyville City Services, they plan to reduce the amount of ash that is going to be generated by burning the waste. All right. And how have they, and how much of reduction? They want to reduce the ash. One second. I'm so sorry, guys. They want to reduce the ash and bring it down to half the amount of ash produced last year. So last year, we have already read that the refuse was burnt and certain amount of large quantity of residual ash was produced. So this year, Shelbyville wants to reduce that amount of that ash to half of last year. Okay, great. Now, what you need to understand in this case before you move on to the next sentence is, if last year the amount of ash produced was X, then this year the goal is to produce only half of X. Okay, understand the scenario. Therefore, if last year X was the amount of ash produced, this year the goal is to produce half of that amount. Okay, and the city has planned to do something in order to achieve this goal. What is that plan? Let's see. Plan is to revamp, which means to change the method of collecting waste. Great. So see how you have to understand this long sentence by breaking it into parts. So far we have 3 pieces of information about things that have already taken place. They are all premises, and one of the premise contains the plan and goal. Let's move on. Let's read the last sentence. This year, city services, so we're talking about what this year will be done. All right. This year, city services will separate for recycling. So they will separate for recycling what? Enough refuse to reduce the number of truckloads of refuse to be incinerated to half of last year's number. Now, again, we have a long sentence here. Okay. This sentence is also a premise because it gives us details about the change in the collection method. What is that change? Let's see. The city services will collect waste. Okay, then they will separate this waste into 2 parts. One part will be sent for burning and the other part will be sent for recycling. Okay, the services will remove the recyclable waste by such an amount that the amount that is finally sent for burning will be reduced. And by how much will this be reduced, guys? The stimulus talks about the reduction in the number of truckloads to be sent for burning. So if the number of truckloads of waste to be sent for burning this year will be half of the truckloads sent for burning last year. This is understood. So if last year there were, let's say, 100 truckloads, so this year if there is going to be half the number of truckloads sent for burning last year, then what we need to again understand is there'll be 50 truckloads sent this year if last year there were 100 truckloads sent. Okay, all right. So the aim is, thus what we can understand is from all of this that the city services plan to separate the waste in such a manner as to reduce the number of truckloads to be sent for burning to half of last year's number. So if last year's truckload was 100, this year they plan to make that truckload down to 50. Now, one thing through this analysis you would notice is that there is no conclusion. Okay, a lot of you were saying that you find it difficult to identify the conclusion. Well, if you go by this method, when you try to sort whether a sentence presented to you is a premise or a conclusion, you will not face this problem. Okay, and I have a short drill coming up where we will discuss more on this. So right now, understand this paragraph does not really contain a conclusion. You don't really know. So what is the author concluding here? Who is concluding here? All right, we have facts over here. So whenever that is not given, what we need to do next is we need to go to the question stem and analyze that. Now the question stem says, which of the following is required for the revamped collection program to achieve its aim? So the question stem is asking us to identify a choice which will be needed to ensure that the goal of the revamped collection program is met. Okay. So from the question stem, we can derive that the conclusion is the revamped collection program will be successful in achieving its aim. And what is that aim? The aim is it will reduce the amount of residual ash generated this year to half of last year's amount. So there you have the conclusion. If you are looking for framing the conclusion, then the conclusion is the revamped collection program will be successful in reducing the amount of residual ash generated this year to half of last year's amount. Okay. Now, if you again look at the question, the question says, which of the following is required? It means the answer choice has to be true. Okay. By the use of the word required, it means the answer choice has to be true for the conclusion to be true. Okay. Thus, we can understand that this choice is an assumption question where we have to come up with an assumption that has to be true for the conclusion to come true. Okay. So this is how we understand the stimulus. Now, I want a quick poll to ask you guys, is this process clear? Just a yes or no will do. Let me bring up a poll here. Give me a moment, guys. Were you able to follow clearly how we analyze the stimulus? Okay, great. All of you were able to do that, right? If there is any step that you have missed out, you have not understood, then we will be coming up with a drill to show you how to analyze the stimulus, and there we can cover whatever gaps you have. So let's now, very few of you say that it's not very clear to you. So let's move to the next part, and that is the pre-thinking, where we will derive the scope of the argument. Okay. All right. So the next step is the pre-thinking. Now, as we told you earlier, that in order to derive the scope of the argument, you must have a very thorough understanding of the stimulus, which is what we have just derived. So from the thorough understanding of the stimulus, we carry forward the conclusion. The conclusion is the revamped collection program will be successful in reducing the amount of residual ash generated this year to half the amount of last year. Okay. Now, so if this is the conclusion, then what will be the scope of the argument? Now remember, the overall crux of the argument is the conclusion. The crux, the heart of the argument is its conclusion. So when we say the scope of the argument, what we also mean is the scope of the conclusion. Okay. What will lie within the scope of the conclusion will decide your correct answer choice. Anyways, so the scope of the argument here, or the scope of the conclusion, will be, okay, since the concern of the argument is the reduction of residual ash, that's what the argument is concerned with, right? It is concerned with the reduction of residual ash this year to half of last year's amount. Therefore, any new information that shows beyond a doubt, okay, it shows that the reduction of the residual ash this year will be half of last year amount, will fall within the scope of the argument. Now, this might look very simple to you, but see what you're doing. You're narrowing down for yourself what answer choices you will really seriously consider. You will seriously consider only those answer choices which actually talk about reduction of residual ash taking place this year. That is how the scope of the argument will help you to eliminate the incorrect answer choices in one shot and with confidence. This sounds simple, but were you doing it before this? Before today, were you really telling yourself after analyzing the stimulus that, look, these are the kind of answer choices I'm going to look for? So once you tell yourself actively that, look, the scope is reduction of residual ash, so only those answer choices will be my concern, which actually talk about reduction of residual ash this year. All right. So there's another thing that you need to remember here. All right. Often the answer choice might give you new information. Okay. So before that, the scope is going to be defined by the concern of the conclusion, as you have understood. Sometimes you will be provided with new information, but that information does not impact the concern of the conclusion. It means that answer choice is not within the scope. So say, for example, you have a choice which talks about residual ash, which talks about last year's residual ash, but doesn't talk about reduction, is out of scope. All right. So you've got to remember that. All right. Is all of this clear, guys? Again, a quick poll for you. Let me just reset the poll and then I'll ask you the question. Is it clear? Is it clear, guys, how you define the scope of the argument? What you tell yourself once you have analyzed the stimulus? Because this is a very important step. It sounds simple, but once you have done this, you will see some of the choices you're able to eliminate without any confusion. Great. All of you have understood that. That's very good. Okay. Let's now move to the, so once we have identified the scope of the argument, next step will be to identify the logical gap. Okay. Again, you have seen how the understanding the stimulus was very important before we move to scope analysis. Now we are going to move to analyzing the logical gap. Now, when you have to analyze the logical gap, the first thing that you have to remember is what is given to you. Because before you identify the gap, you need to know what is there. So what is given to us is that the number of truckloads of waste to be sent for burning this year will be reduced to half the number of truckloads that were sent last year for burning. So once again, if last year 100 truckloads were sent for burning, this year 50 truckloads will be sent for burning. Here, we have also been given, so we have been given that last year 100 truckloads of waste burned generated X amount of ash. Okay, this is what we have kind of taken. So per truckload last year, the amount of ash generated was 100 by X. Okay, 100 truckloads sent, all right, and total amount of ash generated is X. So per truckload, the ash generated was 100 by X. Okay, this is given to us. Now, do we know, okay, the logical gap is we do not know how much ash will be generated by each truckload this year. We have been told that the truckloads will be reduced. Have we been told that the amount of ash generated will also be reduced? That has not been given to us. Rather, that has been assumed. It has been assumed that this year 50 truckloads of burnt waste will not produce more than half of X. Okay? Or in other words, we can say that a truckload of waste sent for burning this year will not produce more residual ash than the truckload of waste, than the ash produced by a truckload of waste sent for burning last year. I want you to take a moment for this to sink in. Okay, see what was given. It was given to us that the number of truckloads will be reduced. It was given to us that last year a certain amount of ash was generated. What is not given to us is how much of ash will be generated this year by each truckload. Okay, so in simpler words, if I put it in simpler words, the author is assuming that reduction in waste to half is equal to reduction in residual ash to at least half. All right, it could be lower than half also, but at least half. Is this understanding clear, guys? I want you to take a moment to look at this and then once again answer me in the polls whether all of this is clear to you. Take a moment to see how you identified what was given, and then because you were so clearly able to identify what was given, you were also able to see what was not given. Brilliant. All of you are, we are all on the same page. Great. So let me move now to the next logical step. With that understanding, okay, with that kind of pre-thinking, using scope analysis, stimulus analysis, we arrive at that assumption. And now with that thought, we move to the next step, that is the answer choice elimination step. Okay, and here let us see how our understanding of the scope and how our pre-thinking and our understanding of the logical gaps helps us. Choice A says, this year, no materials that city services could separate for recycling will be incinerated. Now, one of the things that you need to do when you're analyzing the answer choices is to understand the choice as well. Okay, so what this choice really says is this year, okay, the city services, the amount of materials that the city service separated for recycling will not be incinerated. Okay, so let's take the reverse. If this doesn't happen, like if we try to negate this, okay, let's say A doesn't happen. Okay, let's say A doesn't happen, and some material that could have been separated for recycling gets incinerated instead. Okay, it would this would be, it would not change the given information. Okay, nothing would change. All right, we already know that the city services will reduce the number of truckloads to half of last year's. All right, we already know that that reduction in truckload will occur even if city services send some recyclable material to the incinerator. Thus, this choice doesn't talk about what will happen to the ash. Okay, this choice is out of scope. That is why, and therefore it is not required for Shelbyville to achieve its aim. Okay, so as you can see, this choice actually talks about what will be done with the material which will be separated for recycling. So the 50 truckloads will be reduced after separating material for recycling. Whether that recycling material will be incinerated or not, we are not concerned with that. What we are concerned with that those truckloads, whether they will bring down the ash to half or not, and therefore this choice is out of scope. Okay, so let me again ask those of you who marked this as the correct choice, guys, are you clear why this is not correct? Those of you who marked this as the correct choice, are you clear why this is not correct? Take a moment to see what is given. Does this fall within the scope? Does it talk about reduction of residual ash to half? I'll ask the question again. I think some of you are confused about the question. My question is to those of you who marked this as the correct answer choice. Okay, let me reset the poll and let me ask you the question once again. All right, don't answer the poll now. My question is to those of you who chose A as the correct answer. All right, can you see why A lies out of scope? See how A talks about the material that was separated for recycling. So this choice says no material that was sent for recycling will be incinerated. Now, even if some material is sent for being incinerated, okay, does that fall within the purview of the truckload of waste that was separated for incinerated? No. The reduction in truckload will still be 50. Even if the city services send some recyclable material to the incinerate, it will be a part of that truckload. Okay, so can you see how this choice falls out of scope? Very plainly put, because it doesn't talk whether the ash generated this year will be reduced by half. This choice doesn't tell me that, does it? Can you see how this falls out of scope, guys? Now you can answer the poll. For those of you who marked this choice, can you see how it is out of scope? Can you see how this choice is out of scope, guys? Great. Good. Very good. So you can see how scope analysis would have helped you eliminate this choice right away. You wouldn't have had to deliberate a lot. Let's move to the other choices quickly, guys. We have a lot more things to do. So choice A is incorrect. What does choice B have to say? Separating recyclable materials from materials to be incinerated will cost Shelbyville less than half what it cost last year to dispose of the residual ash. Now, I'm sure if you remember the scope of the argument, does the scope of the argument talk about reducing costs? No. Therefore, we are not concerned with the cost of the program. We are trying to determine whether reducing the number of truckloads will also reduce the ash by half. So this choice is also out of scope. Once again, I'm sure those of you who have marked choice B would clearly see why this is out of scope by now. So that is the importance of scope analysis, guys. It's a very, very powerful tool. Once you have that in your hand, you know what choices cannot fall within the purview. Let's move to choice C. Refuse collected by city services will contain a larger portion of recyclable materials this year than it did last year. Again, we don't care how much refuse is collected or what proportion of that refuse is recyclable. The proportion of waste to be recycled is not within the scope of the argument, remember? Okay, since we already know that the city services will cut the number of truckloads in half. This will happen regardless of whether this year's refuse contains a larger proportion of recyclable material. And also understand, even if recyclable material is high, then the incinerated material will be low, okay? But it could still generate more ash per unit of refuse. So it is not necessary, okay? This is not a must-be true condition for the answer choice to be true, okay? So this choice is also incorrect, right? It doesn't talk about whether the residual ash this year will be reduced to half. It again talks about how much of the recyclable proportion this year's waste form. So this is out. Choice D, the refuse incinerated this year will generate no more residual ash. See the language. No more residual ash per truckload incinerated than did the refuse incinerated last year. So what this choice says and how it falls within in line with our pre-thinking is like this. All right. The amount of ash per unit refuse is less than or equal to the amount of ash per unit last year. Okay. And therefore, the incinerator would generate less than or equal to the amount of residual ash produced last year. Now, this has to be true for the conclusion to be true. And so it is our correct answer choice. Now, those of you who marked this as the correct answer choice, guys, okay, 46% of you marked this as correct. But I want you to see whether you marked it for the correct reason. See how it falls within the scope. It tells you that the refuse incinerated this year, so those 50 truckloads this year, will not generate more residual ash than the truckload per truckload last year. So last year, if each of the truckloads generated 100 by X ash, this year also those 50 trucks together, I mean, each truck of those 50 trucks will also not produce more than the ash produced last year. Okay. With that, let's also make sure that we eliminate choice E on solid grounds of reasoning. The total quantity of refuse collected by Shelbyville City Services this year. Now we're talking about total quantity of refuse. That includes the recyclable material, guys. That refuse will be no greater than that collected last year. The total quantity of refuse collected is not the concern of the argument. That is not within the scope of the argument. Once again, we don't care how much refuse is collected. The thing is, the quantity of refuse could be the same or greater, but the proportion of waste that is to be incinerated can still be less than what it was last year. Okay, all right. Since the number of trucks will be cut in half compared to last year. So since this choice does not impact the conclusion, okay, although it is new information, it is out of scope. The Shelbyville City Services could still achieve its same without E being true, and therefore E is incorrect. So guys, in a crux, you can see that by understanding the scope of the argument, the task of choosing the correct answer choice and eliminating the incorrect ones becomes much smoother, right? And it is even more important as you scale up in terms of level of difficulty. In order to understand the scope of argument, I'm sure by now you have understood that it is important to identify the structure of the stimulus, okay? You have to understand the structure of the stimulus. You have to understand how the author has reasoned in the argument. Analysis of the stimulus leads to better understanding of the scope of the argument. I'm sure you have also caught on to that. So now I'm going to show you how to analyze the stimulus properly, okay? And it might sound very simple to you, okay? But it is not as simple as most of us think, okay? All right, so let us briefly look at how to analyze the stimulus by segregating the various components and understanding their role. We can best analyze the stimulus by identifying the various components correctly. So what is the premise, what is the counter premise, and identifying the role played by each component, all right? This is how you can analyze the stimulus correctly, and we will do this. I'll do this and show you what is meant by identifying the component and identifying the role played by each component. I'm sure you're familiar with some of these structures of an argument, all right? So sometimes it's a simple argument. You have a premise and conclusion, or multiple premises and conclusion, or a premise and a counter premise and conclusion, or you have a premise and sorry, that should be an intermediate conclusion and then a conclusion, or you may have a premise, counter premise, interpremise, intermediate conclusion and conclusion, and so on and so forth. Okay, so the structures could be any of these. Now, what I want you to do is, here is a simple example, guys. Okay, now listen to the task that is there in front of you. I want you to go through this simple stimulus and identify in the correct order the role played by each sentence. So, say for example, I'm just giving you an example. If you believe the first sentence is a premise, and the second is also a premise, and the third one is a conclusion, and the fourth one is also a premise. So I want you to give me in your chat boxes P, comma, P, comma, conclusion, C, comma, P. So P for premise, CP for counter premise, IC for intermediate conclusion, and C for conclusion. So I want you to give me the order of this analysis. You analyze this stimulus and in the chat boxes tell me which sentence is what. Okay, and then I will show, we will see how you have analyzed and how it should be analyzed. All right, so I want you to give me the answers in your chat boxes in the correct order. I'll just mute myself and give you a minute to do this. Okay, guys, so let me just look at some of the answers here before we are going to move in for the analysis. So, okay, just let me see some of the, okay. So here we have, Deepak says it's premise, intermediate conclusion, counter premise, conclusion. Liana says premise, premise, counter premise, conclusion. Sanyam says premise, intermediate conclusion, premise, conclusion. So we can see that we have a lot of diversity here. Ramandeep says counter premise, intermediate conclusion, premise, conclusion. Very good, Ramandeep. I will show how we have arrived at that. Sam says it's premise, intermediate conclusion, counter premise, conclusion. So what I can see is a lot of you have very different answers from the correct analysis. So you can see even for such a simple stimulus, there could be chances that you're not getting the scenario correct. All right. So let me now get in and show you how we should do this so that we don't go wrong. All right. So bear with me, guys, while I take you through this journey. Now, so this is how I do it. And let's read the passage together then. The first sentence. The village of Greenditch is facing a shortage of water due to failed monsoons. Now, this is a fact. Okay, this is a fact about what is happening in the village. So, this must be a premise. All right, definitely. And there is no reason why the author would lie about this. All right. Let's read forward and see what is given next. It is expected that the yield of sugarcane this year will be very low. Now, let's pause for a moment and think. Is there a connection between this and the previous sentence? Yes, there is, right? Without knowing that there is a shortage of water, we won't be able to present this point that yields might be low. Thus, we can say that the first one is premise, and since the second sentence follows from the first one, it has to be a conclusion. It's a derived statement. Okay, I'll repeat this once again. The first sentence is a fact and is a premise. All right. The second sentence is based on the first sentence. Okay. Because there's going to be because there is a shortage of water, it can be expected that the yield of sugarcane will be very low. So therefore, the second sentence is a conclusion. All right. Because it's a derived statement. So far, so good. Just follow. What you need to ask yourself is this our main conclusion? Well, we don't know yet. So we should go ahead and read further. Or keep an open mind, okay? However, farmers have used seeds modified to produce plants that require very little water. Now, however, is a contextual word which tells us that this sentence is a contrast to the previous one. All right. So clearly, isn't this point going against whatever we have read so far? We were made to believe that yields will be low. But this fact about farmers planting seeds which require little water seems to go against whatever we have read so far. However, we do not really know the role played by this sentence yet. Okay. It is definitely going against the first two sentences. All right. So maximum that we can understand is that this is a premise, since it talks about what has already been done. It's a statement after the fact. So it's a premise. That much at least we can analyze so far. Now let's read the last sentence. Therefore, a decent yield of crops can be expected. So finally, we get to know that apart from whatever the situation of low water is, we can still expect a decent crop. This has to be the main conclusion, right? Okay. And what is this conclusion based on? It is based on the premise that the farmers have used seeds modified to produce plants that require very little water. All right. So if the last sentence is the main conclusion and the penultimate sentence is supporting this main conclusion, then the other conclusion has to be the intermediate conclusion, right? Okay. And if that is the intermediate conclusion, then we can break our argument in the following manner. Now, remember how we discussed that the first sentence is the basis for the intermediate conclusion. So the first sentence is the counter premise, actually. Okay, it's a premise, but it's a counter premise because it goes against the main conclusion. And this you will understand after analyzing the entire sentence, entire stimulus. So the village of Greenditch facing a shortage of water is a premise which does not go in line with the conclusion that a decent yield of crops can be expected. All right. Similarly, the intermediate conclusion is that there's a general expectation that the yield will be low. The premise is the third statement that the farmers have used modified seeds, which supports the main conclusion. Right? See how, therefore, a thorough analysis will help you understand the role played by each of the sentences. So when you are called upon to identify the scope of the argument or what is given or what is missing, all these things will be very, very clear in your mind. Right? So let me bring up a poll. I love to hear it from you guys. Is this, are you clear how we analyze this stimulus, guys? let me just put up a poll here. Give me a moment to reset the poll. Okay. Is it clear to you how you should analyze the stimulus, guys? Step by step, the stimulus analysis. Correct stimulus analysis, correct scope analysis. Correct scope analysis, correct answer choice analysis. Okay. So far we have seen two very powerful strategies that will help you answer that 700 plus level question. So just to take this forward, guys, great. Just to take this forward, guys, here is quickly, okay. Acha, I forgot to mention something. There's another learning that you can get from here. The counter premise is actually acting as a premise for the intermediate conclusion. See, look at it closely. And the intermediate conclusion is actually the counter premise for the main conclusion. All right. So the varying roles. Now, let me bring up another question for you to identify the various components before we move on to solving solid full-length questions with the learning that we have taken so far. And I'm going to bring forward the third most powerful strategy, and that is a framework, okay? The framework analysis. So hold on to that thought. And here is another stimulus for you to analyze and present me with the answer in the chat box, same as before. So let me mute myself. All right, I've been getting some answers here, so let me quickly go through this. Okay, so Abhinav says premise, counter premise, conclusion. All right, I think there are more sentences than, than that, Abhinav. Siddharth says premise, counter premise, uh, intermediate conclusion, premise, and conclusion. I believe that's correct. Good work, Siddharth. Sid. Good. So I see some of you have just broken that entire thing into three parts, but okay, I will show you how there are more parts to it. So, so Siddharth, that was good work. The others seem to have broken the, identified only the three sentences individually as three things. So premise, counter premise, and conclusion, and so forth. All right, guys. Now I'll show you how there is more to what meets the eye. All right. So let me take you right through, and we'll do this quickly because I want to move on to the other parts. Now, let's read this quickly together. The first sentence is a premise. Okay, it talks about the new technologies for manufacture of paper require significantly less fuel and water. So this sentence tells us a positive fact about the new technologies. Okay. The second sentence is also a premise. The sentence tells us a negative fact about the new technologies. Okay, so it could be a counter premise as indicated by the counter premise trigger on the other hand. All right, so it could be a counter premise. Let's just hold on to that thought for the moment. So the counter premise is the new technologies require a lot of labor. Right. Now there is an and after that we have therefore. Okay, so this therefore indicates that we have a conclusion here. It's an intermediate conclusion, as we will see down the line. But since I'm doing a little bit of quick analysis here, it's an intermediate conclusion. Why? I will tell you. So the intermediate conclusion here is the new technologies could offset the reduction in fuel and water costs. All right. So this is an intermediate conclusion, and it is based on what? Let's see. Let's read the next sentence. However, okay. However, since labor is cheap. Now see here, the word since indicates that we have a premise. Since is a premise trigger, and it tells us that labor is cheap compared to the cost of water and fuel. This is the third premise. All right. Okay. The main conclusion is the part which starts with however. So this last sentence actually has two triggers. We have one, however, the overall cost of paper manufacture will likely reduce significantly. So this is the main conclusion or the main point that the author wants to make. And if you see, the since labor is cheap compared to cost of water and fuel is part of this sentence, but is not the conclusion, rather it is the premise. All right. So all in all, what we have is this premise 1 and premise 3. Okay. Premise 1 and the third premise, the sentence that says since labor is cheap compared to the cost of water and fuel, these two support the main conclusion. These two support the conclusion that overall cost of manufacture will reduce significantly. On the other hand, premise 2 supports the intermediate conclusion, all right, which acts as a counter premise for the main conclusion. All right, so that's the relationship. Therefore, if you have chosen your answers accordingly, so the first, so you can see, although we have three distinct sentences, we have a lot more packed into that sentence, those sentences. Okay, one sentence can actually be divided into counter premise and intermediate conclusion, and the other sentence can be divided into premise and conclusion. And this is why a very thorough analysis is required before you move to any other part of solving the question. All right. So far we have seen how to analyze the stimulus by identifying various components of the argument, how to understand the scope of the argument, how to understand the roles played. So I want you to try out a full-length question to put in practice all of that, the things that you have learned so far. And after that, we will move to the framework analysis. All right, guys. So I hope you are now all set to go with your newfound knowledge of scope analysis and stimulus analysis. You are part to take on this question that's coming up. So let me bring up the question. Give me a moment, guys. Here is the full length question. I'll give you about 3 minutes or maybe even a little more. I want all of you to give it a good shot. All right. All of you to analyze the stimulus correctly. Okay. Remember the stimulus analysis that we've done. Put everything into practice here. I want you to come up with the scope of the argument, and then I want you to attack the answer choices. All right. So I'll mute myself, and all the best to you guys. Okay, guys, 30 more seconds. And then I'll give you a count. I'll stop the poll. So 30 more seconds you have. All right, guys, I'll do a 10-second countdown for you guys to mark your answers if you are still holding on to them. So here's 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Okay, let me end poll. All right, guys. So what I can see is 23% of you, most of you are divided over 3 choices mostly. Let's see. So 23% of you have chosen choice A, 30% of you have chosen choice B, 10% of you have chosen choice C, 3% D, and a good 33% has chosen E. Now, before I delve into the solution, all right, I want you guys to give me in the chat box what is the conclusion. You must have identified the conclusion of this argument through your argument analysis, right? So in the chat boxes, quickly, I want you to put in one line, okay, one sentence, what is the conclusion? And I don't want you to point out the sentence to me. I want you to write the conclusion for me quickly. All right, so I'll wait. I want you to write in the, right? I want you to write down the conclusion for me in the chat box. Right, let's see. Shivangi says price rose because government curbed poaching. All right, Shivangi, just hold on to each of your conclusions. Huh? Just remember them when I am analyzing um, the stimulus. Sorry. So Shivangi says it's about the price, which is the conclusion. Price rose because government curbed poaching. Vijay says curb poaching was successful. Then Adela says increase the price. Sudhanshu says the price would not have increased is the conclusion. The efforts, then Lana says the efforts were successful because the price of ivory increased. Urmi says the government efforts to curb poaching was a success. Very good, Urmi. Harshit says increased price. So it was so again, as you will realize, the conclusion is not really about price, guys. Okay, so Adiba says its government policy was effective. So I guess Adiba, you mean that the government efforts to curb poaching was successful is the conclusion. Richard says the price of domestically produced ivory have not increased. Dex says poaching reduced. Yes, Dex. Dux shares prices rose because producers were ready to buy goods locally and government curbed local poaching. So what I can understand is some of you have been able to get it that the first sentence itself is the conclusion. Okay. And a lot of you have not got that. So I think that could be one reason why a lot of you have marked the answer choice incorrectly. So now let's see. So I think this establishes even more why it is very important to analyze the stimulus correctly, guys. Okay. Now let's analyze this stimulus and see where we went wrong. Okay. So don't worry if you've gone wrong, guys. The entire purpose of this session is to realize what we are doing wrong, right? All right. So here goes. Let me read the sentence. Now, I'll come back to why I am saying the first one is a conclusion, but for the time being, so the first sentence is government efforts to curb the poaching of elephants primarily for the ivory tusk was a success in 2005. Now, when you read this sentence at the first, it seems to be a premise because it talks about a past event, right? I'm sure this is what a lot of you thought, okay? But when you read the rest of the sentence, you will realize that the rest of the sentence is given to support this sentence, okay? See, let's look at so for now, I'm just marking off the sentence as the conclusion that the government was successful in stopping the poaching of elephants in 2005. Now, why I'm saying this is a conclusion? If I read the next sentences, okay, if the efforts had not been successful, okay, so we are talking about a scenario, if it had not been successful, what would have happened? The price of domestically produced ivory goods, so the ivory goods that were produced domestically, would not have increased significantly in 2005. All right. So from this sentence, what we can understand is that the price of the domestically ivory goods produced did increase in 2005, and it increased significantly. That is why you are saying if the efforts had not been successful, it would not have increased. Okay, let me come back to this. Let's start again. I think there's still some confusion here. The first sentence says the government was successful in stopping the poaching of elephants. And these elephants were mainly hunted for their ivory tusks. So the hunting was mostly done for the ivory, and the government was successful. If the government had not been successful, what would have happened? The price of domestically produced ivory goods would not have increased, which means the government had been successful. And this is borne out by the fact that the price of domestically produced ivory goods actually increased significantly in 2005. All right. So this sentence gives us the reason behind believing that the efforts were successful. Okay. It says the price of ivory goods produced within the country increased significantly in 2005. This we can infer from the portion which starts with if till 2005. And then you have been given a fact marked off by the word since. The fact is the producers of ivory goods buy ivory from all sources that are available within the country. All right. So understand why the author believes. So now if you look at the three statements, okay, the last sentence, the last long sentence has been provided to back the first sentence. Therefore, the first sentence is the main conclusion. Okay. If you look at the question stem also, the question stem plainly tells you, what does it tell you? The argument in the passage would be weakened. So the argument is in the passage itself. What is the argument? Government efforts were successful. Government was successful in curbing the poaching of elephants. Okay. Which kind of poaching? The poaching that was done mainly for tusks. Why is this the conclusion? Because the rest of the sentence is given to support this. All right. So let me ask you in the poll, guys. Those of you who were not able to understand the conclusion, are you clear now? Let me just run a poll for you. Give me a moment. Are all of you clear why the first sentence is the conclusion and we are going to weaken that conclusion? Great. So I'm sure if you, those of you who were not able to see this right away, you can understand how your pre-thinking, how your elimination of the answer choices would also go wrong. Okay, so that seems a very small percentage of you who says you have not understood. Let me repeat for you. Okay, let me just quickly do a recap. If I read these three sentences, okay, if I say there was the shops closed because of coronavirus, okay. If corona had not been wreaking a havoc, the shops would still have been open. So now if I look at these two sentences, what is the purpose of the second sentence? To tell you that the shops are closed because of coronavirus. All right. If corona had not been there, the shops would not have closed down. So in this case also, government efforts were successful. To back this, the rest of the sentence has been given to you. If the efforts had not been successful, something else would have not happened. All right. So understand that. So therefore, all in all, what is the scenario here? We are being told that the price of ivory goods produced within the country increased significantly in 2005. Now, ivory goods are made from ivory, all right? And the fact is, the producers who make ivory goods, they buy ivory from all sources, okay? So if the price of ivory goods produced increased, it must have increased because the government was successful in stopping the poaching of elephants, all right? Because that means the supply of ivory from the tusks would have reduced. So let's go to the pre-thinking straight away. That will make things better. So the author reasons that since the prices for the domestic ivory goods increased, the efforts to curb poaching were successful. So the efforts to curb poaching were successful is the conclusion. We have to weaken the idea that the efforts to curb poaching were successful. What does that tell us about the scope of the argument? The scope of the argument would be any new information. Now write it down, guys. Okay. Scope of the argument would be any new information that tells us that the efforts to curb poaching was not successful. That is the kind of answer choice we are looking at. All right, that is the kind of answer choice we are looking at. I'll repeat and I want you to note it down. The conclusion is the efforts to curb poaching were successful based on the fact that prices for domestic ivory goods increased. Okay, and we have to weaken the idea that the effort to curb poaching was successful. So our scope of argument would be any new information that indicates that the efforts to curb poaching was not successful. Okay. Now here we can apply, so since we are talking about price, guys, all right, we can apply our learnings about demand, supply and prices, all right. So demand is high, then the supply. So this is a sort of small framework that you can carry with you. This is not the framework I was talking about, but this is also a framework whenever you are looking at questions dealing with demand or supply or price, any of the three components or any one of the components also. So this is the understanding that when the demand is high and the supply is fixed or low, the price will increase. If the demand is fixed or low, but the supply is high, then the price will be low. So based on this, poaching of elephants for the ivory tusk will add to or maintain the supply of ivory for the ivory goods producers, since they are willing to buy from any and all sources, and this would keep the prices from rising. Again, understand, if the poaching of elephants for the ivory tusk continues, okay, it will help to maintain the supply of ivory for the ivory producers, and this will stop the prices from rising. So this falls within the scope of our argument. This tells us that the efforts to curb poaching were not successful if we get an information like this, all right? Thus, the author makes a connection that the supply must have been reduced significantly by curbing poaching to raise the prices. So our weakener would be any statement that shows that the supply in the country of ivory from poachers, guys, mind it, the supply from poachers was reduced, but not because they stopped poaching. Okay, it is quite possible that the supply was reduced because the prices did go up. We can't falsify that. All right, but we have to show that the supply from poachers was reduced, but not because they stopped poaching. Poaching was not curbed. Okay, is this understanding clear to all of you guys? Let me ask you in the poll before we move forward. Let me just reset the poll, guys, before you answer it. Is this scope analysis and pre-thinking clear to you? Good. Take a moment if you want. Okay. Understand the dynamics here. So what is given to us here? Again, it seems some of you are not very clear about it. Let me just do a quick recap before we move on. So see, understand, the author is saying that prices for domestic ivory goods increased. Okay. And this increased because the efforts to curb poaching were successful. So in a way, the author is saying that the supply of ivory from the poachers decreased, and that is why the the price of ivory goods which are made from ivory increased because there was a dip in the supply of ivory from the poachers. Okay, so we have to weaken the idea that the effort to curb poaching was successful. So we have to prove that the effort to curb poaching was not successful. So any choice that tells us that the effort to curb poaching was not successful will be in the scope of the argument. Now we are told that poaching of elephants, for their ivory, that supplies ivory to the ivory producers. Okay, because we are told that they buy ivory from any source. So if the supply from poachers keeps up, then the prices would not have risen. But we have been given that the prices have risen. Okay, so the author makes the connection that the supply must have been reduced because the prices rose. So how do we weaken this? We show that the prices rose, yes, but not because the supply reduced from the poachers. Because the poachers did not stop poaching, because the efforts to curb poaching was not successful, right? So let me reset the poll. Is it now clear to all of you, guys? This pre-thinking, is it clear to you? It's clear to all of you? Great. All right, I can see all of you. So good. Let me now move on to the. So I'm sure by now most of you must have realized where you went wrong. Okay, you did not do the deep diving required into the analysis of the stimulus, into the analysis of the scope, and that is why probably you were not able to spot the correct answer. So here is the first answer choice. Poachers started getting a significantly better bargain abroad for their ivory in and around 2005. Now, what does this choice really tell us? This choice tells us that the poachers are still poaching, but they are selling the ivory outside the country. And thus, the supply of ivory is reduced. It has raised the prices. So it explains why the prices were rose. This choice explains why the prices rose. The prices rose because the supply of ivory was reduced. But this choice also tells you that the supply did not reduce because poachers had stopped poaching. Poachers were poaching, but they were selling most of their ivory abroad. And this therefore weakens the conclusion that government efforts were successful. Okay, government efforts were successful to curb poaching. I want all of you to answer, guys. Okay, take a look for a moment here. Those of you who got this right and those of you who did not get it right, I want all of you to answer me if you have understood the logic behind this answer choice. Okay. Yes, great. So see the importance of the powerful tools that we have just looked at, the scope analysis and the stimulus analysis. Okay, this choice tells you that, okay, the poachers are still poaching, all right, but they are selling their product ivory outside. So if they are selling their ivory outside, the supply within the country of ivory gets reduced. So the producers are buying probably ivory at raised prices, and that is why they have increased the price of their goods. All right. So this choice, all in all, it weakens the idea, weakens the belief that the poachers are not poaching or the government efforts has been successful in curbing poaching. So choice A is correct. Let's still eliminate the remaining answer choices. All right. Because a lot of you were divided over the answer choice. So choice B says the demand for ivory products, primarily decorative items, suddenly shot up in 2005 following a countrywide fashion trend. Now, understand this choice, okay, it talks about the demand of a certain type of ivory item. All right, that increased the price. The demand increased and the price increased. All right, fair enough. Does this choice tell us that the supply from the poachers remained the same? Does it tell us that poaching continued? Unlike choice A, if you see, this choice could have happened despite the supply remaining the same or low. Okay, let's say the supply was same, but because the demand increased and therefore the price increase. It doesn't touch upon the idea of poaching being curbed. All right. So increase in demand itself does not prove that supply of ivory from the poachers had increased or decreased, because here they're giving you a different reason for the increase in the increase in the price. They're telling you that the demand for ivory products increased, but this does not tell you whether supply from the poachers had increased or decreased. All right. So this choice has a very ambiguous impact, mixed impact kind of here, and therefore this is incorrect. You can take a moment to let this sink in. This choice does not explicitly tell you that the poachers were still poaching. Okay. And if you had understood the scope of the argument, then you would not have chosen this as the correct answer choice, because this does not tell us that the government efforts to curb poaching were unsuccessful. Choice C. In 2005, independent poachers joined forces to form bigger groups which could face increased government vigilance. All we are saying is that there were more powerful poachers, but whether these poachers were able to continue poaching in the face of the government efforts is not made clear by this choice. Okay? Does it clearly tell us that these bigger poachers continued to poach? It's just given they could face. All right. So this choice is like halfway there, and therefore it is out of scope because it does not impact the conclusion that government efforts were not successful. The government, it does not bring about the desired impact on the conclusion that government efforts were a success. You have to prove that the government efforts were not a success. So that makes C incorrect. Choice D, hardly anybody chose, but I'll quickly touch on this. In 2005, poachers identified a unique and untraceable technique of hunting elephants. Now, this choice indicates that poachers were better equipped to hunt. However, it does not tell us that they were actually successful in continuing to poach. Okay? It just tells us they identified a technique, but whether they continued to poach using that technique, we don't know. Therefore, this is also out of scope. None of all the choices which are out of scope don't tell you whether government efforts were successful or not. They touch on all the other areas, but not that. Right? So therefore, it is incorrect. Majority of you chose choice E. Now let's see where you went wrong. The producers of ivory products are always ready to pay exorbitant prices for raw ivory since they know that they can recover their money. Now this choice adds to the already given information that producers are willing to buy ivory from all sources. Okay. For this choice, the increase in price could have happened because producers were buying ivory at high prices. Does it tell us where they were buying it from? No. Okay. So because they were buying ivory at high prices, it added to the cost of production. So this choice actually does not indicate why the producers were buying ivory at high prices. It could have been because ivory was low in supply, or because the sellers of ivory had hiked their prices for some reason. It could be anything. Therefore, this choice is also out of scope because it does not touch upon the point that government efforts were unsuccessful in curbing poaching. It does not tell us that the poachers, the supply from poachers went down. That's your scope. The supply from poachers went down. That is going to weaken the conclusion. Okay. All right. So you can see that scope analysis. You've already seen the importance of scope analysis, stimulus analysis. So there's another thing which also helps a lot. In fact, in this case also you saw that to some extent, the framework for demand, supply, and price. All right. So sometimes it is easier for us to pre-think if we already have a framework already there for us, and we can use that framework to analyze the given question. Okay. About 50% of the GMAT official questions can be fitted into some of the frameworks that we have produced. So I'll share with you one of the frameworks that we have here for causal arguments. All right. So let me start on that. Choice is incorrect. Okay. So what is a causal argument? First and foremost, a causal argument is one in which the conclusion contains a cause and effect relationship. Okay. So that is, the author states a cause and the effect brought about that cause in the conclusion. Now, the core assumption behind such causal arguments is no other cause is responsible for the stated effect. Because if any other cause is responsible, then the conclusion does not stand. All right. So for these kind of arguments, we've prepared a very simple framework. So the first step in the framework is to identify the causality correctly. Sometimes a cause and effect relationship is given in the premise, not in the conclusion. That kind of argument is not a causal argument. So identifying the causality is very important. The causality should be a part of the conclusion. Okay. So be very careful. You have to be very careful here. You have to be very precise as to which part of the conclusion is the cause and which is the effect. And you should name them as X and Y respectively for the sake of convenience. This is the first step. Thereafter, we have these 3 guidelines which you should follow. Okay. The first guideline is X happened before Y. Now, whenever the author says X is the cause of Y, the author clearly means that there is no other relationship or correlation in terms of time between X and Y. Okay. X and Y is not a coincidence. X and Y could not have happened because of a third common cause. All these are the assumptions that the author is making. So when you are looking for answer choices, you keep this in mind, that the core assumption here is also that X should have happened before Y. This is the first guideline that you can keep in mind. The second guideline is nothing else could have caused Y. That is, there is no other alternate cause. Had there been any other cause, then the author cannot conclude that X caused Y. So this is the second guideline to be remembered. Okay. As stated earlier, if there were any other cause possible behind the effect, the author could not have arrived at the conclusion. The third guideline here is there is no reverse causality. Okay. What does reverse causality mean? Y could not have caused X. So the author has also assumed that Y could not have caused X. I know you might be thinking, well, Y could not have caused X is the same as X happened before Y. It is true, the two things are pretty similar, but there could be choices which make clear distinctions about these two things. Okay. So X happened before Y is clearly about the time factor, ruling out any coincidence, any third common cause. And Y could not have caused explicitly tells you that Y is definitely not the cause of X. So see, this is a very simple framework and you can fit this in any causal argument, guys. Okay. In fact, I'm going to give you a simple causal argument and let you use this framework. So if you want to write down the framework quickly, you can do so on a piece of pen and paper. I'll give you about a few seconds to do this. So the first step is to identify the cause and effect relationship mentioned in the conclusion. The second step is to use 3 guidelines. The first guideline is X happened before Y. So if you're looking for an assumption in such a question, or if you're looking to strengthen such a question, you look for choices which tell you that X happened before Y. You look for choices which tell you there is no other alternate cause involved. You look for choices that tell you that there is no reverse causality at play. Okay. So is all of this clear, guys? Let me just bring up the poll for you. Is this framework clear? And is this framework clear? Great. Right. So I now want you to apply this framework in the question coming up next. So let me end the poll and bring up the question. Quickly, we will not dwell too much on this. So here is the question. You have about 2.5 minutes to solve this question. All right. Maximum 3. So I'll mute myself in the meantime and bring up the poll. All the best, guys. Okay, guys. So I'm going to give you a countdown of 10, and I hope you mark your answer choices if you have decided on them. So 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right, great. So let me end the poll. Okay. Let's see. Choice A has 11% of you rooting for it. None for choice B. C has 64% of you rooting for it. So let's see whether C is the answer or not. We will see that. Nobody for D and 23% of you rooting for E. So let's quickly move to the analysis of this. Here goes. There's the passage. So let's read together. For the last 3 months of the year, environmentalists have been campaigning. Okay, we're talking about a certain period in the last year. Environmentalists have been campaigning against the use of LP gas in households. Okay, they don't want LP gases to be used in households as it causes the release of significant quantities of greenhouse gases. Okay, so this is the cause why they are against LP gas. It causes addition to, it releases greenhouse gases, and that adds to the rising pollution levels in the city. So if I break down the meaning, for the last 3 months of the year, there have been campaigns led by environmentalists against LP gases used in houses. And LP gases emit considerable amounts of greenhouse gases, and this contributes to the increase in the pollution. So we have a premise here. Okay, we have been told about an event last year and the reason behind that event. Let's read on. During this period, there has been an 8% decrease in the sales of LP gas cylinders. Okay, so so there has been this the sales of LP gas cylinders went down by 8%, and a nearly similar increase in the sales of natural gas, which causes much less pollution. So again, we have a lot of things packed into this this premise. Two things have happened simultaneously. Again, in the same period in the last quarter of the year. 8% reduction in the sales of LP gas cylinders that are used in houses, and 8% increase in the sales of natural gas. And we have also been told that natural gas causes considerably less pollution than LP gas. That additional piece of information is there that can be inferred if we say that natural gas causes much less pollution. Let's read on. Clearly, the environmentalist campaign has led people to choose natural gas over LP gas. All right. So here we have a conclusion marker clearly, which tells us that the conclusion is something has led to something. So clearly we have a cause and effect here. The cause is the environmentalist campaigning against LP gas, and that has led to the effect that people are switching from LP gas to natural gas. Here. So now that with this analysis, okay, a simple enough stimulus, with this analysis, we move forward, and once we have realized that there is a cause and effect thing here, we can use the framework that we had. All right, so let's see how we will use the framework. The first step is to identify the cause and effect, which we have done. All right, now we will look at the guidelines. First guideline, X happened before Y. Okay, now if you look and we have to weaken this conclusion, so that means we have to show that the environmentalist campaign has not led people to choose natural gas. That's not the reason. So for a weakener, what are the things that we will do? We will look for choices which show that Y happened before X. Okay, all right. So using the first guideline that the normal assumption is X happened before Y, we are going to look for a choice which says that Y happened before X. So say, for example, any statement that shows that the switch from LP gas to natural gas started before the first of the campaign started. You would have noticed that in the paragraph, we are just told that in the last quarter of the year, these things were happening. But we haven't been explicitly told what happened first and what happened next. If you look at the second sentence, it just says, during this period, there has been an 8% increase. So this 8% increase, did it start before the campaign started, after the campaign started, in the middle of the campaign started? We don't know that. All right. So a weakener would be any statement that shows that the switch from LP gas to natural gas started before the first of the campaign started. Then if you look at guideline 2, okay, we can look for an alternate cause to weaken the conclusion. So another weakener would be any statement that shows that something else could have caused people to switch from LP gas to natural gas. So here we can come up with some scenarios actually. I mean, very quickly, since we're talking about supply. So say people became aware of certain harmful effects of food cooked on LP gas, and that is the reason they are switching to natural gas without any impact of environmentalist campaign. Or let's say the supply of LP has been reduced due to some reason which has got nothing to do with the campaign, and that is why people now have to buy natural gas. So these could be possible weakness. Then we look at the third guideline, reverse causality. Okay, if we can prove that Y caused X, so any statement that shows that because people were opting for natural gas over LP gas, that inspired the environmentalists to start campaign against LP gas, and that kind of information will weaken the causality. So you can see, the moment you have a framework, you know exactly what lines to think along. All right, and that makes the task so much easier, right? You don't have to think in all sorts of random direction. The first thing is to identify that it's a causal argument, and then all you have to do is to place the you have to just kind of put in the data. All right, with that understanding, with those kind of weakness, all right, let's move on to the answer choice analysis. So let's look at choice A. Most natural gas providers have raised their prices over the last 3 months. Now this choice is more likely the result of increasing demand for natural gas after the campaign started, right? If the natural gas providers have raised their prices, okay, I mean, this does not establish or disprove the relationship between the campaigns and increased demand for natural gas. This, in fact, is more like a distortion of the information about increase in the sales of natural gas, right? So once again, most natural gas providers have raised their prices over the last 3 months. Could have probably happened because people started buying more of natural gas, okay? But we don't know why people started buying more of natural gas, all right? So that is what this choice does not by establish or disprove the relation between the campaign and the increased demand for natural gas. It does not tell us that it was the campaigns which was not responsible for the increased demand. Let's move to choice B. So choice B, nobody chose this. I'm just it supports the causality. It's a strengthener. So that is why it says that sales of LP gas has never been as low as they have been in the last 3 months. So in the last decade. So it's kind of saying that maybe it was actually the cause. The cause was the campaign. Let's move to choice C. A lot of you chose choice C. In fact, I think if I remember correctly, 63% of you chose this, and this is the correct choice. Good, guys. So you can see how the framework helps. Majority of the LP gas manufacturing plants have been facing labor unrest, and that has led to strikes and shutdowns. You can take it a step further. If it has led to strikes and shutdowns, then the supply of LP gas would have reduced. Okay, it would have fallen considerably, and that would have led to the buying of natural gas. So this provides you with an alternate reason behind people switching to natural gas, and therefore this is the correct choice. Again, no one chose choice D, so I'm not going to dwell on this. Again, it supports the causality, so probably that is why you eliminated it. Good work. E. It is known that LP gas emits less than half the greenhouse gas emissions than coal-fired plants, coal-fired power plants. Now, there is a comparison being made here, but this comparison is between LP gas. The argument is between LP gas and natural gas. It is not between LP gas and coal-fired plants. Okay, so that makes this choice irrelevant. All right, and therefore it is incorrect. How much of gas is emitted by coal-fired power plants is not going to tell us why they're switching from LP gas to natural gas. Right. So the thing is, just want to point this out. You might be wondering whether you have to use the framework. Well, it's up to you, but the framework does make this pre-thinking easier. We have a lot more such frameworks, units dedicated to such many more frameworks for questions like plan goal questions, comparison based questions, quant based questions. Okay, and definitely the framework helps you to solve questions faster and better. So with that, we come to the end of this webinar, guys, and I am going to, I mean, we're running short on time, so that one more question that we have, we're not going to do that. I'm just quickly going to hand over the reins to Saqib. So Saqib, here goes. Let me just share the information that will be required by our students, and you can take over from there.
Hey everyone, so I am very quickly going to share the session PDF. So those of you who want to try out the last question that we haven't discussed yet, you can use that. You can use this PDF. You can download the PDF. Just look in the file section. You'll be able to see it. Also, I am adding a poll here. I would like you to give your feedback. Let us know how you like this session. In general, if you have any other questions regarding the any other questions regarding the course or GMAT-Wiz or anything, please feel free to ask. I'll be more than happy to answer them. If any of you would like to talk to us, I'm sharing a Calendly link. Okay, I'm sharing it to everybody. Yeah, so you should have access to the link now. Okay.
There's one small thing. I think you'll have to also share the support and information. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am, I'm doing it, not a problem. So, guys, here is our email ID and contact number. If any of you want to get in touch with us, want to know more about GMAT-Wiz, you can just contact us at support@gmatwiz.com. And I would highly recommend that if none of you have tried our free trial yet, I would request you to do so. If you like these frameworks that Sunita discussed, then there are a few more in the free trial. You can look at that, and if you want to then upgrade and want to work with us, then you're more than welcome to get in touch with us. Okay. Once again, I've added a Calendly link. If you want to talk to us, want to know more about GMAT in general, any preparation strategy, you want to know how you can prepare with us, feel free to use this link that is shared in the chat, and you can book a session with us. It's free, completely free. So, and yeah, then you can, and we'll try to help you out in whatever way possible. Okay. Any other questions in general, if you have, you can type it in the chat box and I'll try my best to answer it. I would encourage all of you to rate the session. I've added a poll. I've published it now. You should be able to see it. So you can rate this session, and also you can let us know how you like this session. Glad to hear that Urmida, Sam, you liked it. It's good to hear that you found this useful. Okay, guys, I'll wait for another minute or two. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to take them up. If not, as I said, the email ID and phone number is there. You can get in touch with us. I'm once again pasting the Calendly link. It's just gone down among the chats. So you're more than welcome to book a session with us, and we'll try to help you out. Glad to see that you all found it helpful. Okay, I'll wait another minute. Yes, Mohit, we do counsel for admission process also. So if you are interested in talking to us about it, as I said, just drop us a mail, or you can use the Calendly link as I shared, and then we can discuss about it. We can try and help you out with that also. Any other questions, anyone? Okay, guys, so I don't see any more questions, so I'm going to end the webinar now. Once again, feel free to write to us and get in touch with us, and we'll be more than happy to help you ace GMAT. Okay, so I'm ending the session.
Thank you, guys. A very good night to all of you.